Good morning, it's Stacey Ashley here, and I thought I'd jump on this morning and just talk a little bit about what should you be leading right now. It's a pretty complicated situation, and lots of complexity around some of the dynamics in the world at the moment. And what I've been finding when I've been speaking to some of my leaders, particularly C-suite and senior leaders, is where do they focus? Where do they make the most difference? And to some degree, how do they create certainty in their people, give their people some confidence that yes, they're actually leading as the situation is quite dynamic and changing, and there's lots of ebb and flow, and I really feel people need that certainty to have a little bit of confidence in their leadership. But leaders are a little bit lost in some cases as to where they make the most difference. So if you're seeing it, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. I'm going to share a couple of frameworks today, keep it nice and simple and pretty short as well. So what I want to talk about is, firstly, what is it that you should be focusing on? Of course, we've all got day-to-day activity that takes our attention, but what is it that's actually going to make the difference in terms of how do we lead through this set of circumstances that we're facing, particularly, with the situation in the Middle East and some of the consequences that creates around the world, some of which may be impacting your organization or industry and some not. But the thing is, it's actually impacting everyone at a personal level. And so even if your particular organization is not dramatically affected in terms of how you go about your day-to-day business, it's important to recognize that your people are still being impacted in their broader life beyond the walls of work. And so I think that that's one of the things that as leaders we need to recognize and really be able to step up to. So let me just firstly share my thoughts on some of the things that you should be thinking about beyond the let's just react to the day to day. And this comes from a lot of the work that I've done around responding to emergency and that sort of thing, and leading kind of turbulent times. And this particular approach comes from the Australian Disaster Resilience Institute, but is echoed through lots of similar organisations around the world. Again, pop your comments in, because I'll, even after the live ends and you're watching the recording, I'd be super happy to have a conversation with you. So this is work that I shared with my clients in early March to help them to be able to have a cohesive way of approaching what was then a very volatile situation. So there are 4 stages that we need to think about when we're dealing with emergency situations, turbulent situations, really kind of dynamically evolving situations. And it really starts at this prevention quadrant that you can see here in this donut framework. And prevention is not always possible, but is something that we need to focus on in terms of preventing consequences in our space. Now, whether you've actually been working through this or not, there's always more work to do, and better to start today than tomorrow. So the next piece of how do we lead, or what should we focus on as leaders in dynamically evolving circumstances, is our preparedness. As an individual, in our teams, in our organizations, how capable are we? How well thought through is our planning? What else do we need to be considering? So really having that intense preparedness. And one of the things that I spoke to my clients about is the importance of actually standing up a cross-organisation team to really think this through, to be asking the important questions. What else? What next? What then? So that level of preparedness can be matured or accelerated. And so if you say, my executive team is too busy to do that, that's okay. What a great stretch opportunity for your aspiring executives to be really thinking strategically about this preparedness piece. So the preparation is important. If you've already done it, great, but make sure you continue to focus on it. If you haven't yet really intentionally focused on how do we prepare for this situation, then I really encourage you to do that. So once we've done some focus on prevention and some focus on preparedness, of course, then we get into response. And a lot of people or organizations will have leapt into the response phase, perhaps without doing the preparation. So again, it's this cycle that we've got to keep revisiting. Response is exactly that. What are we going to do? How are we going to do it? And there might be multiple eventualities that you need to consider in your response. And part of response is, are our people ready to respond? Have we equipped them? Have we thought about how we might need to adapt our strategy? Have we thought about how we're going to respond in terms of how we work with our clients or our guests or our providers or our industry? Those are all facets of this response piece. And then finally, the final stage of this cycle is recovery. So if there's been some kind of, tremendous impact or consequence of change of direction, that sort of thing, how do we recover from that as an organization? If we've maybe depleted all of our reserves of inventory, or, our people are depleted, or whatever it is, how do we recover? Now, I get that this is a simplistic approach, but it's super practical, because actually what's happening is that you will have multiple areas of focus and you'll be at a different stage in this cycle for each of them. So imagine, multiple donuts all at different stages through the cycle. So in some you're in preparation, and in some, you're in recovery, and some you're in response, some you're in prevention. And so there's, complexity in it. But if we can break it down into phases or areas of focus that people can grasp, then it's easier for them to be able to participate in what is it that we need to be doing. What do we need to be focusing on right now? In a world that, has got some unpredictability and some uncertainty and that sort of thing. And if you're able to work with your people as a leader, whether it's of a team or a business unit or an entire organization, if you're able to work with them and give them, those focuses, give them, this is how we're approaching this. Again, you're creating kind of certainty in your leadership and confidence in your leadership. And when the world around them is changing and in flux, people really need that. Everybody needs a leader. And so think of that as part of your responsibilities of leadership. So that's very broadly, what do we need to be focusing on over and above, day-to-day reactive stuff? What do we need to be focusing on from a strategic perspective in this kind of complex set of scenarios and circumstances that we find ourselves in right now? Because realistically, there's always going to be a next thing and a next thing and a next thing. So we need to get really good at this. Prevention where we can, preparedness always. So we always want to be updating that. The actual response, so executing what we've prepared for, and then the recovery. How do we make sure that we reinforce our resourcing, that we continue to build capability, that we're always thinking strategically, our recovery, and then around we go again. So that's the first piece that I really wanted to talk to you about today, was what do we focus on as a leader? What do I need to be focusing on? What do I need to be leading right now? And if you're not doing this, that's okay. Start today. Get your people, the right people, asking the right questions, and come up with an approach. So that's the first thing. The second part, though, of being a really good or even great leader, when we've got emergency and we've got turbulence and we've got this kind of emergent set of circumstances that, continue to create flux and uncertainty, is there are particular things that you as the leader need to be very intentional about. There's sort of 3 attributes. So let me share those with you as well. So the first thing is that as the leader, you need to focus very specifically and only on the important things. The things that only you can do, that are going to make a difference, make an impact, have value. Yeah. So in the context of what you're doing, prevention, preparedness, responsiveness and recovery, is what do you need to do within that? That's your specific focus, where you add unique value that only you can in your role as a leader. So it's not about trying to do everything. It's not about being so busy that, you kind of get distracted and interrupted and all that sort of thing. Be very intentional about what you focus on, what you put your time, attention, and energy into. That's the first thing. The second thing, and it will be no surprise, is communication. In times of change, turbulence, uncertainty, flux, conflict, changing circumstances, it's really important that you are visible as a leader. And that's often a significant part of that is communication. So communicate early, communicate often, simple, clear messages with consistency over and over and over again. In times of change, it takes people up to 7 times of receiving that message to actually hear it and absorb it. So think about your channels of communication. Think about, frequency of communication. Think about how you can be really deliberate about your communication, whether it's, a combination of written and messaging and video and audio. Like, there's lots of things that you can do, but choose your channels and make sure that they support the channels that your people access. Make it easy to do so that your communication doesn't become an obstacle. It's a flow. So something that, you can do easily and frequently, and take the responsibility of communication really seriously. And of course, make it two-way. So it's not just a one-way flow. There needs to be an opportunity for people to have a conversation or offer their insight or perspective, and you need to be listening to that. So communication is the second key attribute of good leaders during times of change and turbulence and emergency. And then the third thing is to build capability. When things are changing around them, people need to know that they are equipped to participate in what is happening, to maybe be able to contribute to the way forward. If they don't feel confident in their own abilities, then they're less likely to step forward. They're less likely to be proactive. They lose confidence, all of those things. So we want to make sure that we are building capability, also in systems and processes and technology and so on, but definitely in our people. They need to know that, yes, I can do this and I can play my part. And so that's the third thing. And so when we do those 3 things as leaders, focus specifically and only on the important, really prioritize communication and continue to build capability, what we're creating is clarity, it's confidence, and what's my third one? And we're supporting contribution. And so we're really allowing everyone to participate in full in moving us forward through this period of uncertainty and, unnavigated pathways and that sort of thing. And so that's the how. So we've got, this is what you need to focus on: prevention, preparedness, response, recovery. And how you do it is by having specific focus, communication, building capability. And so what we end up with is these 2 things together. And this is your framework for leading through change, turbulence, emergency, the unknown. Yeah. And so that's really what I wanted to share with you today is, having spoken to so many leaders who are not 100% sure whether they're focused on the right things, whether they're doing the things that are going to make the biggest difference, here's a way of you being able to look at what you're doing versus what you perhaps could be doing and going, okay, where do I need to make an adjustment to make it more possible to make the most important difference for you, your people, your organization. So I would love to hear from you what you think, what you're maybe doing, what a key idea is that you've had, all of those things, because it's important to me that you set yourself, your people, your organization up for success. And right now, people need you to be leading with clarity, with visibility, and to have confidence and certainty in your leadership. Not confidence and certainty that you have all the answers, but confidence and certainty that you are deliberately and intentionally leading them and that you are committed to that. Because that gives them an anchor in a world that is, rapidly changing around them and can be really challenging to navigate at times. So even if your organization is pretty stable, not overly impacted, remember your people in the rest of their lives are being impacted, even if just by seeing the news, that has an impact on people. So recognize that and be a leader. If your organization, of course, is being impacted and there are lots of consequences or potential eventualities, some of which will be amazing and great, again, be a leader. Be visible, be clear, and focus on what you need to do and how you need to do it. So I hope that helps. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And until next time, I'm Stacey Ashley. Bye for now.